You see, in all my years of observing people and their behaviors, one truth keeps surfacing. Intelligence isn't just about how high your IQ is or how many degrees you've earned. Those things might look impressive on paper, but real intelligence? It's about how you live your life. It's about the decisions you make, the way you treat others, and how willing you are to learn, even when life throws challenges your way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are certain patterns, certain behaviors that stand out, and not in a good way. I've noticed there are 10 undeniable signs. Yes, 10, that reveal when someone is, let's just say, falling short in the wisdom department. But don't get me wrong. This isn't about labeling people or tearing anyone down. Far from it. The truth is, we've all fallen into these traps at some point. What matters is recognizing them and using that awareness to grow. Why does this matter? Because these signs aren't just about spotting foolishness in others. They are also mirrors, reflecting behaviors we might want to rethink in ourselves. And that's the beauty of this journey. It's not about judgment, but transformation. By identifying these signs, we can break free from cycles of ignorance and help others do the same. So, are you ready to dive in with me? Together, we're going to uncover these 10 signs, not as critics, but as curious learners. Each one carries a lesson, a story, and an opportunity to grow wiser. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the path to wisdom always begins with awareness. Let's take that first step together. Ready? Let's begin. Talking more than listening. Some people seem to think the world revolves around their words, their opinions, their stories. You know the type, the ones who never stop talking long enough to truly hear anyone else. It's almost like they believe the louder they speak, the more intelligent they'll seem. But here's the reality. The ones who talk more than they listen often miss out on the most important thing of all, growth. You see, wisdom doesn't come from hearing your own voice. It comes from understanding, learning, and truly connecting with others. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was a team leader at her company, known for her quick wit and confidence in meetings. But here's the problem. Sarah loved to dominate conversations. Whenever her team members tried to share their ideas or discuss concerns, Sarah would cut them off, redirecting the focus back to her own thoughts. "Let me tell you how we'll handle this," she'd say, completely ignoring the input of her colleagues. At first, her confidence seemed like leadership, but over time, it became clear that her unwillingness to listen was doing more harm than good. One day, during a major project presentation, a junior employee named Alex tried to point out a flaw in their approach. Sarah, as usual, brushed him off. "We've already decided on this direction," she said dismissively. The team went ahead with Sarah's plan, but Alex had been right. The project fell apart due to the very issue he'd tried to address. The company lost a major client, and the team's morale hit an all-time low. What Sarah didn't realize was that her constant talking wasn't just silencing her team, it was stifling innovation and trust. Her colleagues felt undervalued and overlooked. And for Sarah, she lost the respect of her team. The fallout wasn't just about a failed project. It was about relationships that could have thrived if only she'd taken the time to listen. Here's the lesson. Talking more than listening isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of insecurity. People who feel the need to dominate every conversation often do so because they are afraid of what silence might reveal, that they don't have all the answers. But here's the truth, none of us do. And that's okay. Wisdom doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from being open to learning from others. The Stoics had a powerful saying, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Think about that for a moment. Real intelligence isn't about proving you're the smartest person in the room. It's about being humble enough to recognize that everyone has something to teach you. When you listen, you gain new perspectives, strengthen relationships, and open doors to opportunities you might never have imagined. If you see a little bit of Sarah in yourself, don't worry. This isn't about blame, it's about growth. Start by practicing one simple habit. The next time you're in a conversation, pause before you respond. Ask yourself, am I really listening, or am I just waiting for my turn to speak? Make an effort to ask more questions. Show genuine curiosity about what others have to say. You'll be amazed at how much you can learn when you truly listen. Listening isn't a passive act, it's a skill, one that takes practice and intention. But the rewards are worth it. You'll not only gain deeper insights and build stronger connections, but you'll also find that people start to value and respect your words even more when they know you value theirs. So, the next time you're tempted to dominate the conversation, remember this: the wisest person in the room is often the one who speaks the least and listens the most. Arrogance over humility. Arrogance is a sneaky thing. It has a way of disguising itself as confidence. But when you take a closer look, you realize it's hollow, more about projecting superiority than actually possessing it. It's that need to prove you're the smartest, the most capable, the one who always has the answers. But here's the catch: arrogance isn't just off-putting to others. It's a roadblock to personal growth. You can't learn anything new if you believe you already know everything. Let me introduce you to Ben. Ben was a senior manager at a tech firm, someone who always wanted to be the center of attention in every meeting. He prided himself on his expertise and wasn't shy about letting everyone know it. During brainstorming sessions, whenever a colleague offered a suggestion, Ben would immediately dismiss it with a smirk. "That won't work," he'd say. "I've seen this before, and I know the outcome." His tone made it clear. He thought he was always right. One day, the company faced a major challenge. A new competitor was disrupting the market with innovative solutions. The team proposed fresh ideas to counter the competition, but Ben refused to consider them. "We don't need to reinvent the wheel," he insisted. "Stick to what I know works." His refusal to adapt led to missed opportunities, and before long, the competitor gained a significant edge. But the real turning point came when Ben's arrogance finally caught up with him. During a critical meeting with a potential investor, Ben dominated the conversation, dismissing the investor's questions and concerns. By the end of the meeting, the investor decided to walk away, citing Ben's unwillingness to collaborate as the main reason. It wasn't just a lost deal, it was a wake-up call. Ben's arrogance had cost the company, his team, and ultimately, his own reputation. Here's what we can learn from Ben: arrogance isn't strength, it's weakness in disguise. It creates blind spots, pushing away valuable insights and isolating you from the people who could help you grow. True strength comes from humility, the kind that says, "I don't know everything, and I'm willing to learn." The Stoics taught that arrogance is a barrier to wisdom. They believed that the wisest individuals are those who recognize their own limitations. Think about it. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. It's about being open to others' perspectives, valuing collaboration, and understanding that there's always room to grow. If you find traces of arrogance creeping into your own behavior, it's not too late to change. Start by actively seeking out feedback, even if it's uncomfortable. Ask yourself, am I more focused on being right or on doing what's best? Take the time to really listen to others and acknowledge their contributions. You'll be surprised at how much you can learn when you stop trying to prove yourself and start opening yourself to growth. Humility is a quiet strength. It builds trust, fosters collaboration, and paves the way for real wisdom. So, the next time you feel the urge to assert your superiority, pause and ask yourself, what can I learn here? Because the truth is, the most intelligent person in the room isn't the one trying to impress everyone. It's the one who's willing to learn from everyone. Blaming others for mistakes. Blaming others for mistakes is one of the most common yet destructive habits people fall into. On the surface, it might seem harmless. After all, pointing fingers can be easier than owning up to your flaws. But in reality, it's like building a wall between yourself and personal growth. When you constantly shift blame onto others, you're not just avoiding accountability, you're also cutting off your ability to learn, improve, and ultimately succeed. Let me tell you about Lisa, an event coordinator with big ambitions but a troubling habit. Lisa was great at taking credit when things went right, but when things went wrong, she was quick to find someone else to blame. During one of her biggest projects, a corporate gala, things started falling apart. The catering was delayed, the venue setup wasn't complete on time, and the overall event felt chaotic. Immediately, Lisa began pointing fingers. She blamed the catering team for poor communication, the decorators for missing deadlines, and even her assistant for not double-checking the details. But here's the twist. When the dust settled, it became clear that Lisa hadn't shared the timeline with the vendors early enough. She hadn't communicated her expectations clearly to her team. And yet, she refused to acknowledge her role in the failure. As word of her behavior spread, her reputation took a hit. Colleagues started to avoid working with her, and soon, Lisa found herself on the sidelines of important projects. What Lisa didn't realize was this: by blaming others, she was not only hurting her relationships but also sabotaging her own potential. You see, when you refuse to accept responsibility, you shut the door to growth. Mistakes are like mirrors. They reflect areas where we need to improve. But if you're too busy blaming others, you'll never take the time to look into that mirror. The Stoics believed that the first step to mastering life is mastering yourself. Blaming others is the opposite of self-mastery. It's an act of denial. When you own your mistakes, you gain power over them. You learn, you grow, and you become better equipped to handle challenges in the future. On the other hand, when you shift blame, you remain stuck, repeating the same errors over and over. If you find yourself falling into the blame game, pause for a moment and ask yourself a simple question: what could I have done differently? Shifting the focus from others to yourself isn't about guilt. It's about empowerment. Once you acknowledge your role in a situation, you can start taking steps to improve. Take responsibility, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to grow. Here's the thing: taking responsibility doesn't mean you're weak. On the contrary, it's a sign of true strength. It shows that you're brave enough to confront your flaws and committed enough to overcome them. When you own your mistakes, you earn respect, both from others and from yourself. So the next time something goes wrong, resist the urge to point fingers. Instead, take a step back, reflect, and ask yourself how you can do better. Because in the end, success isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them. And those who embrace accountability will always outpace those who hide behind blame. Closed-mindedness. Closed-mindedness is like living in a fortress, one you've built yourself. Every brick is a belief you refuse to question. Every wall is an idea you're unwilling to challenge. It might feel safe in there, but the truth is, it's a prison. People who are closed-minded don't just shut out new ideas. They shut out growth, understanding, and opportunity. It's not just ignorance. It's self-imposed stagnation. Take Mark, for example. Mark was a department manager at a mid-sized company. He'd been with the company for over a decade and prided himself on knowing the ins and outs of the business. When younger employees suggested updating their outdated processes with modern tools, Mark dismissed the idea immediately. "We've done it this way for years, and it's worked fine," he'd say, brushing off every suggestion with a wave of his hand. But as the industry evolved, competitors began using those very tools to streamline their operations. They delivered results faster, adapted to client needs more effectively, and quickly left Mark's team in the dust. When performance started to decline, Mark doubled down on his old methods, blaming the market, his team, and even external factors. The one thing he refused to question? Himself. What Mark didn't realize was this: a closed mind doesn't just keep out new knowledge, it actively prevents progress. By clinging to outdated ways of thinking, Mark wasn't just hurting himself, he was holding his entire team back. Eventually, the company had no choice but to restructure, and Mark found himself replaced by someone who was willing to embrace change and innovation. Here's the lesson: closed-mindedness might feel like strength, like standing firm in your beliefs. But in reality, it's fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of being wrong, fear of change. And that fear keeps you locked in place while the rest of the world moves forward. The Stoics teach us that wisdom begins with recognizing how little we actually know. True confidence doesn't come from rigid certainty but from a willingness to learn, adapt, and grow. A wise person isn't afraid to say, "I don't know," because they understand that admitting ignorance is the first step toward understanding. If you see a bit of Mark in yourself, it's time to break free from that fortress. Start by asking yourself, what if I'm wrong? What could I learn from a different perspective? Seek out conversations with people who challenge your views, not just those who agree with you. Read books or listen to ideas that make you uncomfortable. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It happens when you're willing to step outside of them. When you let go of the fear of being wrong, you open yourself up to a world of possibilities. You begin to see that new ideas aren't threats, they're opportunities. You'll not only gain knowledge but also earn the respect of those around you, who will see you as someone willing to evolve. So, The next time you feel yourself resisting a new idea, take a moment to reflect. Is it because the idea is truly unworkable, or is it because it challenges your comfort zone? Remember, the greatest minds in history were not those who clung to what they knew, but those who dared to question, explore, and adapt. True wisdom isn't about holding onto what you believe, it's about being open to what you've yet to discover. Fear of change. Fear of change is one of the most paralyzing forces in life. It keeps people clinging to what's familiar, even when it no longer serves them. It whispers in your ear, stay where you are, it's safe here, while robbing you of the opportunities waiting just beyond your comfort zone. Change is inevitable, yet some people resist it so fiercely that they miss out on the very things that could transform their lives for the better. Let me tell you about Michael. Michael had spent his entire life in the same small town. He knew every street corner, every neighbor, and every local store. It was his bubble, his safe place. When his grown children moved to a bustling city for better opportunities, they encouraged him to join them. They told him about the vibrant community, the parks, and the activities he could enjoy. But Michael refused. I've lived here my whole life, he'd say. Why should I leave now? I know how things work here. For a while, life in the town was as predictable as ever. But slowly, things started to change. Longtime neighbors moved away. Shops he frequented shut down, replaced by new businesses he didn't connect with. The sense of familiarity he clung to began to fade. Still, he resisted the idea of moving. It wasn't until a health scare forced him to rely on his children for support that he finally decided to relocate. And here's the surprising part. Once he settled into his new environment, Michael realized how much he'd been missing. He discovered new hobbies, met interesting people, and built a closer relationship with his family. What he once feared turned out to be the best thing for him. Michael's story teaches us an important lesson. Fear of change isn't about the change itself. It's about the uncertainty that comes with it. But life doesn't stand still. It moves, shifts, and transforms whether we like it or not. Resisting change doesn't preserve your comfort zone. It shrinks it until there's nothing left. The Stoics believed that change is a natural part of life, and the key to thriving lies in embracing it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Think about that. It's not the change itself that's the problem. It's how we perceive it. If we see change as a threat, we resist it. But if we see it as an opportunity, we open ourselves up to growth and transformation. If you find yourself fearing change, start by reframing your perspective. Instead of asking, "What could go wrong?" ask, "What new possibilities could this bring?" Break the change down into smaller, manageable steps. Sometimes, it's not the change itself that's overwhelming, it's the idea of it. By taking small actions, you'll build confidence and reduce the fear of the unknown. Another powerful tool is gratitude. Reflect on past changes in your life that turned out to be positive. Remember how you grew, adapted, and became stronger because of them. Let those memories remind you that you are capable of navigating change. Life is like a river. It flows whether you're ready or not. You can't stop it, but you can choose how you move with it. Will you let the current carry you to new and exciting places, or will you fight against it, exhausting yourself in the process? The choice is yours. So, the next time you feel the pull of resistance, take a deep breath and step forward anyway. Embrace the uncertainty, the challenges, and the growth that comes with it. Because when you stop fearing change, you start living fully. And who knows? The life you're meant to live might just be waiting on the other side of that leap. Lack of empathy. A lack of empathy is like living in a world of mirrors where the only reflection you see is your own. It's the inability, or sometimes the unwillingness, to step into someone else's shoes, to understand their struggles, or to care about their experiences. People who lack empathy often see relationships as transactions, emotions as inconveniences, and others' problems as irrelevant to their lives. But what they fail to realize is that empathy isn't just about kindness. It's about connection, growth, and understanding the deeper layers of humanity. Let me tell you about Paul, a colleague who struggled with empathy. Paul was a senior project manager who had a reputation for being efficient but cold. He prided himself on meeting deadlines and hitting targets, but he paid little attention to the people on his team. One day, Susan, one of Paul's team members, missed a critical deadline. Paul, Frustrated, confronted her in front of the entire team. "You're holding everyone back," he said sharply. He didn't ask why the deadline was missed. He didn't even care to know. What Paul didn't know was that Susan had spent the past week caring for her son, who was hospitalized with a serious illness. She'd been balancing work and her personal crisis the best she could, but it wasn't enough. That public reprimand not only humiliated Susan but also alienated her from the team. Morale plummeted, and the trust within the group began to crumble. Fast forward a year. Paul found himself in a similar situation when his mother fell seriously ill. Suddenly, he had to juggle work responsibilities with late-night hospital visits and emotional exhaustion. For the first time, he understood what Susan had gone through. And for the first time, he realized how his lack of empathy had hurt not just Susan, but the entire team. Paul's story is a stark reminder that a lack of empathy doesn't just harm others, it isolates you. When you can't connect with others on an emotional level, you lose the opportunity to build trust, deepen relationships, and learn from diverse perspectives. It creates a barrier between you and the people who could enrich your life the most. The Stoics believed that true wisdom comes from understanding others, not just ourselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize?" Empathy begins with reflection, an honest look at our own struggles, fears, and imperfections. When we understand ourselves, we're better equipped to understand others. If you find yourself struggling with empathy, start by practicing active listening. The next time someone shares something with you, resist the urge to judge, dismiss, or offer quick solutions. Instead, ask questions like, "How are you feeling about this?" or "What can I do to help?" Sometimes, simply being there and showing you care is enough to make a world of difference. Another way to cultivate empathy is by broadening your perspective. Read stories, watch films, or engage in conversations that expose you to experiences different from your own. The more you understand the diversity of human experiences, the more you'll appreciate the struggles and triumphs of others. Remember, empathy isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's what allows us to build bridges instead of walls, to heal wounds instead of inflicting them, and to navigate life with grace and understanding. So, the next time you're tempted to dismiss someone's feelings or ignore their struggles, take a moment to pause. Ask yourself, how would I feel in their position? Because in the end, empathy isn't just about helping others, it's about enriching your own humanity. Overconfidence without substance. Overconfidence without substance is like a balloon filled with air. It looks impressive, but it takes very little to burst. People who exhibit this trait are often quick to project an image of expertise and capability. Yet when it comes time to deliver, their lack of depth becomes glaringly obvious. It's not just about arrogance. It's about the danger of believing in your abilities without putting in the work to back them up. And that overconfidence often leads to avoidable mistakes, broken trust, and missed opportunities. Let me introduce you to Alex. Alex was a young entrepreneur with a lot of ambition and a knack for making bold claims. At networking events, he'd confidently pitch his startup idea, boasting about his plans to revolutionize the industry. Investors were initially drawn to his charisma and determination. He made it sound as though he had everything figured out, from business strategy to technical development. But here's the problem. Alex hadn't done the research to back up his claims. He hadn't tested his product thoroughly or considered the competition's advantages. When he finally secured funding and launched his product, it was riddled with flaws. Customers quickly lost interest, negative reviews piled up, and investors started asking tough questions. Under pressure, Alex admitted he had overpromised and underdelivered. The trust he had built through his confidence evaporated almost overnight, and so did the opportunities that could have followed. What Alex failed to understand is that confidence isn't a substitute for competence. True confidence comes from preparation, experience, and a willingness to learn, not from projecting an image of success while neglecting the work required to achieve it. Overconfidence without substance doesn't just risk failure, it guarantees it. The Stoics often warned against the dangers of false confidence. Epictetus, for example, emphasized the importance of knowing what you don't know. He taught that humility is the foundation of growth and that overestimating your abilities leads to unnecessary suffering. To be truly confident, you must first understand the limits of your knowledge and work diligently to expand them. If you see shades of Alex in yourself, don't be discouraged. This is an opportunity to grow. The first step is to replace blind confidence with informed confidence. Before making claims or decisions, ask yourself, do I have the facts? Have I done the necessary work to support this? Seek feedback from people you trust, even if it's uncomfortable. Honest critique is a powerful tool for uncovering gaps in your knowledge or preparation. Another way to combat overconfidence is to cultivate curiosity. Instead of assuming you already know the answers, approach challenges with the mindset of a learner. Research deeply, ask thoughtful questions, and be open to the idea that you might need to adjust your approach. Confidence grounded in genuine understanding is far more powerful and far more lasting than confidence built on appearances. Remember, there's nothing wrong with aiming high or believing in your potential. The problem arises when belief isn't matched by effort and substance. True confidence doesn't need to shout or exaggerate. It speaks for itself through results. So, the next time you feel the urge to project an image of certainty, pause and reflect. Am I prepared? Do I truly know what I'm talking about? When confidence is rooted in substance, it becomes unshakable, inspiring trust in others and paving the way for real success. Ignoring consequences of actions. Ignoring the consequences of your actions is like walking through a minefield blindfolded. It might seem fine at first, but eventually, reality catches up with you. People who live this way often make decisions without considering the ripple effects. They focus on the short-term gains or the immediate ease of their choices, completely disregarding the long-term outcomes. But here's the truth, every action has consequences, and ignoring them doesn't make them go away. It only makes the fallout worse when it inevitably arrives. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel worked as a sales manager and had a reputation for being results-driven. His motto was, do whatever it takes to close the deal. At first glance, this made him look like a high achiever, but the way he operated revealed a troubling pattern. He'd overpromise to clients, offering services the company couldn't realistically deliver, just to secure contracts. Internally, he'd push his team to their limits, ignoring their complaints about burnout and unrealistic expectations. For a while, Daniel's numbers looked great. He was praised for bringing in big clients and hitting aggressive targets. But then, the cracks began to show. The clients he'd overpromised to became frustrated when the company couldn't meet their expectations, leading to cancelled contracts and bad reviews. Meanwhile, his team's morale plummeted. Several employees quit, citing Daniel's unrelenting pressure as a major reason. The company eventually faced a wave of challenges, lost revenue, damaged reputation, and a depleted workforce. And Daniel? He was let go, not because he wasn't talented, but because his unwillingness to consider the consequences of his actions had caused more harm than good. Daniel's story highlights a crucial lesson. Ignoring the consequences of your actions might seem like a shortcut to success, but it's really just setting yourself up for failure. Every decision we make, big or small, has a chain reaction. When we act without considering the impact on others, on the future, or even on ourselves, we're not being wise, we're being reckless. The Stoics believed in the concept of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. In simple terms, it means thinking ahead and anticipating potential challenges or negative outcomes. By considering what could go wrong, you're better prepared to make thoughtful decisions that minimize harm and maximize positive results. Wisdom isn't just about knowing what to do. It's about understanding the full picture, including the potential consequences of your choices. If you recognize a tendency to ignore consequences in your own life, start by practicing mindfulness in decision-making. Before acting, take a moment to ask yourself, what are the possible outcomes of this action? Who could it affect, and how? Is this decision aligned with my long-term goals and values? Write it down if you have to. Sometimes seeing it on paper can make the potential consequences more real and harder to dismiss. Another strategy is to seek diverse perspectives. Talk to people you trust and ask for their input. They might see angles you've missed or point out risks you hadn't considered. Remember, wisdom often comes from collaboration, not isolation. Ignoring consequences might feel easier in the moment, but it's a dangerous habit that leads to regret, conflict, and missed opportunities. When you take the time to think ahead and consider the ripple effects of your actions, you're not just protecting yourself. You're creating a path of integrity and success for yourself and those around you. So, the next time you're faced with a decision, pause. Reflect on the bigger picture, not just the immediate result. Because in the end, the wisest people aren't the ones who act on impulse. They're the ones who think before they act, ensuring their choices lead to growth, not regret. Prioritizing pride over truth. Pride is a powerful emotion. It can motivate us to achieve great things, but when it's misplaced, it becomes a trap. Prioritizing pride over truth is like building a house on a shaky foundation. It might look solid for a while, but the moment reality kicks in, everything crumbles. People who let pride dictate their decisions refuse to admit mistakes, ignore inconvenient truths, and cling to the illusion of being right, even when it's clear they are wrong. But here's the catch. Prioritizing pride doesn't just distort reality. It destroys opportunities for growth and trust. Let me share the story of Caroline. Caroline was a senior designer at a prominent advertising agency, known for her creativity and strong opinions. One day, during a major campaign pitch, her team suggested a fresh, innovative idea that aligned perfectly with the client's vision. But Caroline, driven by pride, insisted on sticking with her own concept. "This is my project," she said. "I know what the client wants better than anyone else." Her team tried to persuade her, pointing out flaws in her idea and highlighting the strengths of the alternative. But Caroline wouldn't budge. Her pride was tied to proving she could single-handedly steer the campaign to success. The client, however, wasn't impressed. They found her proposal outdated and uninspiring, ultimately choosing to work with another agency. The fallout was significant. Caroline's team felt demoralized, their creativity stifled by her unwillingness to listen. Her reputation within the agency suffered, not because she lacked talent, but because her pride had blinded her to the truth. Caroline's story is a cautionary tale. Pride might feel like a shield, protecting your ego, but in reality, it's a wall, one that blocks out constructive criticism, collaboration, and the truth. When pride takes precedence, the desire to be right overshadows the need to do what's best. And the consequences? Lost opportunities, broken relationships, and stagnation. The Stoics believed that truth is the cornerstone of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change my mind." The truth never harmed anyone. Think about that for a moment. True strength doesn't come from stubbornly clinging to your perspective. It comes from the courage to admit when you're wrong and embrace the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. If you see a bit of Caroline in yourself, don't be disheartened. This is an opportunity to grow. Start by practicing humility. When faced with criticism or differing opinions, resist the urge to defend yourself immediately. Instead, listen carefully and ask yourself, could they be right? What can I learn from this? Remember, admitting a mistake doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Another strategy is to focus on the bigger picture. Ask yourself, am I prioritizing my ego, or am I prioritizing the goal? When you shift your focus from being right to doing what's right, you'll find it easier to let go of pride and embrace collaboration and truth. Finally, surround yourself with people who value honesty and aren't afraid to challenge you. Create an environment where truth is valued over ego, and you'll not only grow but also earn the respect of those around you. Pride is temporary, but truth endures. The next time you're tempted to prioritize your ego over reality, take a step back and reflect. What's more important, being right or getting it right? Because in the end, the wisest people are those who understand that growth comes from seeking truth, not defending pride. When you choose truth over ego, you don't just become a better person, you create a better world for everyone around you. Refusing to learn from failures. Refusing to learn from failures is like falling into a hole and refusing to look up. You stay stuck, blaming the hole, the ground, or even gravity itself, instead of figuring out how to climb out and avoid falling into it again. Failure is one of life's greatest teachers, but only if you're willing to pay attention. People who refuse to learn from their mistakes don't just stay stagnant, they actively dig themselves deeper, repeating the same errors over and over. Let me introduce you to David. David was a small business owner with big dreams. He opened a cafe in a bustling neighborhood, pouring his savings into the venture. He worked hard, but after a year, The business started struggling. Customers complained about long wait times, inconsistent quality, and a lack of new menu items. David, however, refused to take the feedback seriously. "They don't understand how hard this is," he'd say. "I'm doing my best." Instead of reflecting on what wasn't working, David doubled down on his original approach. He blamed the slow sales on competition and bad luck, never questioning his outdated practices or lack of innovation. Within another year, the cafe closed its doors for good. But here's the thing, David didn't stop there. A few months later, he opened another cafe in a new location, repeating the same mistakes. Once again, he refused to adapt, and once again, the business failed. David's story is a classic example of what happens when you let your ego and fear of change get in the way of growth. Failure itself isn't the problem, it's the refusal to learn from it. Every mistake carries a lesson, but when you ignore it, you're doomed to repeat the cycle. The Stoics had a simple but profound view on failure. They believed that setbacks are not obstacles but opportunities. Epictetus once said, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are." In other words, failures reveal your weaknesses, but they also show you where you need to grow. Ignoring those lessons means rejecting the very tools you need to improve. If you find yourself avoiding the lessons of failure, it's time to change your approach. Start by reflecting on your mistakes without judgment. Ask yourself, what went wrong? What could I have done differently? Write it down if you need to. Seeing your thoughts on paper can help you gain clarity and pinpoint areas for improvement. Another important step is to embrace feedback, even when it's uncomfortable. Talk to people who were involved, whether they are coworkers, friends, or customers, and ask for their honest perspective. Listen with an open mind, not to defend yourself, but to understand where you can do better. Lastly, cultivate resilience. Learning from failure requires you to face uncomfortable truths, but it also gives you the tools to bounce back stronger. Remind yourself that failure is not a reflection of your worth. It's a natural part of the growth process. The key is to see it as a stepping stone, not a roadblock. Imagine if David had taken the time to analyze why his first cafe failed. He could have improved his operations, trained his staff better, and revamped his menu. His second attempt might have succeeded, and his dream of running a thriving business could have become a reality. But by refusing to learn, he set himself up for the same disappointment twice. So, the next time you fail, and you will, because failure is inevitable, don't shy away from it. Embrace it. Study it. Learn from it. Because in the end, the wisest people aren't those who never fail. They're the ones who fail, adapt, and come back stronger. Failure isn't the end of the road. It's a signpost pointing you toward the path of growth.